April 2, 1945. Late afternoon. A gray convoy of canvas-covered trucks rumbles through the pine forests of North Carolina, dust rising in soft clouds behind the tires. Inside the truck bed, 32 German soldiers sit shoulder to shoulder on wooden benches, wrists free but bodies rigid with exhaustion. Feldwebel Karl Heinemann keeps his eyes fixed on the sliver of sky visible between the canvas flaps. It is too blue, too calm. Nothing like the smoke-choked horizon he last saw outside the Ruhr. For 3 weeks he has been a prisoner of war. Captured near Remagen after his unit dissolved under American artillery, he expected interrogation, beatings perhaps worse. The propaganda broadcasts had been clear. American camps are starvation cages, guards who smile before they strike. Food so scarce men fight over potato peels. Yet no one had struck him, not during capture, not during transport across the Atlantic, not even now. The truck slows. Through the canvas slit, Karl sees barbed wire, but it is neat, geometric, almost orderly. Wooden barracks stand in clean rows. No mud, no shouting, just the distant hum of insects and the metallic clang of a gate opening. A guard's voice calls in accented German, calm, almost bored. Remain seated, you will dismount in groups, no barking. No rifle butt against the canvas, just procedure. Karl feels something unfamiliar stir beneath his ribs, confusion. The truck stops fully, the rear flap is pulled open, and sunlight floods in warm, golden, indifferent to war. One by one, the prisoners climb down, boots crunching on pale gravel. American MPs stand nearby with carbines slung low, cigarettes dangling from relaxed fingers. One of them nods, not mockery, not hatred, just acknowledgement. Karl looks away quickly. He does not want kindness from an enemy. Kindness is dangerous. It makes a man hope. They are marched toward a long wooden building. Above the door hangs a simple painted sign. Mess hall. The word means little to some of the younger soldiers, but the smell drifting through the screen door needs no translation. Bread. Fresh bread. Not the dense, gray ration loaves from the Eastern Front. This is lighter, sweeter. The scent alone makes Karl's stomach tighten painfully, as if remembering a life before war. Behind him, someone whispers, "It's a trick." Another answers, "It must be, because what else could it be?" Inside, the air is warm and thick with steam. Long metal trays slide along rails. American cooks in white aprons move with mechanical efficiency, scooping, slicing, pouring. No one shouts. No one rushes. A young private ahead of Karl receives his tray and freezes. On the plate, 2 thick slices of white bread, a ladle of real meat stew, potatoes, soft and whole, and beside it, a glass bottle beaded with condensation, dark liquid, a red label, white script, Coca-Cola. The private does not move until a guard gently taps the counter. Keep going. Karl steps forward next. The cook barely looks up as he places the bread on the tray. The slices bend under their own softness. Karl hasn't seen bread like this since 1939. Then the stew. Real chunks of beef sink beneath the surface, not horse, not turnip water, beef. Finally, the bottle is set down with a quiet clink, cold against the metal. Karl stares at it. His throat tightens unexpectedly. For a moment, the noise of the room fades, the clatter of trays, the murmur of German voices, even the distant laughter of American guards. All he can hear is memory, summer, a cafe in Cologne, his wife's hand around a glass just like this, gone now. Maybe, he doesn't know. Letters stopped months ago when the bombings grew heavier. Move along, the cook says softly. Karl nods and walks, though his legs feel strangely unsteady. He sits at a long wooden table across from Obergefreiter Lucas Brandt, a machine gunner who survived Stalingrad only to be captured in the West. Brandt's hands tremble as he touches the bread, pressing a fingertip into the white surface as if testing whether it is real. No mold, Brandt whispers. Across the hall, another prisoner laughs, once sharp, broken, then quickly covers his face. No one begins eating immediately, because this cannot be true. Because if the enemy can feed prisoners like this, what does that mean about everything they were told? Carl picks up the bottle. The glass is sweating in his palm. He twists the cap. It opens with a soft metallic hiss, an ordinary sound that suddenly feels enormous. He takes a sip, cold, sweet, alive with bubbles that sting his tongue. For a second, his vision blurs. He lowers the bottle slowly, staring at the table so the others will not see his eyes. But he is not the only one. Down the row, a veteran sergeant is quietly crying into his sleeve. Another man bows his head over the bread as if in prayer. No guards react. No one mocks them. The Americans simply continue serving food, tray after tray, as though this moment is unremarkable. As though mercy is routine, Carl forces himself to taste the stew. The meat is tender. Real fat coats his tongue. His body responds with almost violent hunger. Yet something deeper resists. A question forming where certainty once lived. If this is how the enemy treats prisoners, then what else has been a lie? Outside, beyond the neat fences of Camp Butner, the war in Europe is collapsing hour by hour. Cities burning. Armies retreating. A Reich promised to last 1,000 years now measured in days. But inside this mess hall, the first crack appears not in Germany's borders, but in the minds of the men who fought for it. And Karl Heinemann is beginning to understand that captivity may reveal something far more dangerous than defeat. The truth. Morning comes softly to Camp Butner. No artillery. No shouted orders before dawn. No frozen boots to force onto blistered feet. Instead, pale sunlight slips through the barracks windows and settles across rows of iron-framed bunks. For a few disoriented seconds, Feldwebel Karl Heinemann forgets where he is. The silence feels unnatural, almost suspicious. Then he hears it. Bird song. Real birds. Somewhere in the Carolina pines beyond the wire. The sound is so ordinary it feels unreal, like a memory from another lifetime. On the Eastern Front, silence meant danger. Here, it simply means morning. Karl sits up slowly. Around him, other prisoners stir with the same cautious confusion. Some reach instinctively for rifles that are no longer there. Others just stare at the ceiling, as if waiting for the illusion to collapse. It doesn't. Across the aisle, Obergefreiter Lucas Brandt swings his legs down and whispers, "They let us sleep." Karl nods, though the statement feels absurd. Soldiers are not allowed to sleep. They steal it between bombardments. They bargain for it with frostbite and fear. Yet the guards had not woken them. No roll call in darkness, no punishment. Just sleep deep and uninterrupted. Another contradiction. Boots thud outside, but not in anger. The barracks door opens and an American sergeant steps in, clipboard tucked under one arm. His German is clumsy but clear. "Good morning." "Breakfast in 10 minutes," he says it the way a school teacher might. Calm, routine, almost polite. No threats, no insults, just information. When he leaves, murmurs ripple through the room. They are pretending. Someone says. They want something. It will change, because it must change. The world they know has rules. Enemies are cruel. Prisoners suffer. That is the order of things. Without it, nothing makes sense. Karl feels the same resistance inside himself. Hope is more frightening than hunger. Hunger you understand. Hope can betray you. Still, when they march to the mess hall again, the smell reaches them before the doorway opens. Coffee. Real coffee, dark, bitter, unmistakable. Not roasted acorns or burnt barley. Coffee. Brandt exhales a shaky laugh. "If this is a trick," he murmurs, "it is a very expensive one." Inside, trays fill once more. Eggs this time, sausage, more white bread. Butter wrapped in paper stamped with English words none of them can read. Karl watches the cooks carefully, searching for cruelty hidden beneath routine. He finds none, only fatigue, boredom, even. These men serve food the way factory workers assemble parts, mechanical, indifferent. As if feeding enemy soldiers is simply another daily task, he sits and eats faster today. His body is already adapting, learning abundance again. That realization brings a flicker of shame. How quickly survival rewrites loyalty. Across the table, a young replacement named Dieter suddenly speaks. "My mother wrote last winter," he says quietly. "She traded her wedding ring for potatoes." No one answers. Because every man at the table has a similar story. Bomb cities, empty shelves, children growing thin while propaganda promised victory, thus beyond the horizon. Carl remembers his last leave in Cologne, queues stretching for blocks, women arguing over turnips, the silent knowledge that the war was already lost even while the radio shouted triumph. And now, this, unlimited bread, meat every day, sugar in glass bottles, given freely by the enemy. The contradiction presses on his chest like weight. After breakfast comes medical inspection. Another surprise. American doctors check wounds without asking rank. Frostbite scars from Russia. Shrapnel never properly removed. Malnutrition hidden beneath uniforms. One medic pauses at Carl's left hand, where two fingers never healed straight after a winter patrol in 1942. "How long like this?" the doctor asks. Carl hesitates. 3 years. The doctor exhales softly, something like disbelief, or maybe pity. He writes a note and moves on. No lecture, no accusation, just treatment. Outside, the camp unfolds in quiet order. Volleyball nets, a small library hut. Even a fenced garden where prisoners are apparently allowed to grow vegetables. Brandt stares at it all and mutters, "This is not a prison." Carl answers before thinking. "No, it is something worse." Brandt looks at him, confused. Carl watches an American guard laughing with another MP, the sound casual and unguarded. A nation that can afford laughter in wartime. A nation that feeds enemies better than its own soldiers were fed in Russia. What kind of war is this? Because if Germany had truly been winning, if the Reich were truly strong, would they be the ones behind the wire? The thought is treason, dangerous even here. He forces it down, the way soldiers learn to bury fear. But doubt, once planted, grows quickly. That afternoon, new prisoners arrive, trucks again, dust again. The same hollow-eyed expressions Carl remembers from only yesterday. He watches them step into the mess hall, smell the bread, see the Coca-Cola. Watches realization spread from man to man like silent fire. One of the newcomers, an older sergeant with gray at his temples, takes a single bite of white bread. Then suddenly sits down hard on the bench, shoulders shaking, not from hunger, from understanding. Carl feels the moment land inside himself with quiet finality. This camp is not breaking their bodies, it is breaking something else. And as evening shadows stretch across the neat American barracks, a question begins to form among the prisoners, unspoken, but shared by all. If the propaganda was a lie about the enemy, what else was a lie about the war? The answer is already on its way across the Atlantic. And when it arrives, nothing inside Camp Butner will ever feel uncertain again. April 12, 1945, just after dusk. A cold rain drifts across Camp Butner, tapping softly against the barracks roofs. Inside, rows of German prisoners sit on their bunks in unusual silence. Word has spread. The Americans are about to make an announcement. No one knows what kind. Rumors move faster than truth in a prison camp. Berlin surrounded, the Rhine crossed, Hitler dead, Hitler victorious. Every possibility whispered, none confirmed. Feldwebel Karl Heinemann leans against the wooden wall, arms folded tightly across his chest. He has learned to distrust anticipation. On the front, hope usually arrived just before catastrophe. Boots approach outside measured, unhurried. The barracks door opens, and an American lieutenant steps in carrying a portable radio set. Two MPs follow, not with weapons raised, but simply present, witnesses more than guards. The lieutenant looks across the room of gray uniforms. His German is careful, rehearsed. "You will hear news from Europe," he says. Official broadcast, a current of tension passes through the prisoners. Some sit straighter, others stare at the floor, already bracing for loss. The radio crackles a live static first, then a distant voice in English. None of the prisoners understand the words, but tone alone carries meaning. Formal, heavy, important, the lieutenant translates slowly. President Roosevelt has died. In Warm Springs, Georgia, today, silence follows. Not the silence of shock, something stranger, confusion, almost. Roosevelt was the enemy's leader, the architect of Germany's destruction. His death should feel like victory, yet no one cheers. Because the lieutenant's voice contains no triumph, only gravity. War, Carl realizes, is bigger than any one man. Even enemies mourn their dead. The broadcast continues. More translation. American forces advancing. Soviet troops near Berlin. German surrender in several regions. Each phrase lands like distant artillery muted by thousands of kilometers, yet impossible to ignore. Across the barracks, young Dieter presses his palms into his eyes. My father is in Berlin, he whispers. No one answers. There is nothing to say. Every family in Germany now lives beneath falling bombs or approaching armies. Distance does not protect the heart. Carl feels a slow tightening in his chest, not fear for himself, but for the world he once understood. The map of Europe is dissolving, border by border, city by city, and here he sits, warm, fed, alive, a prisoner with more certainty of tomorrow than civilians in his own country. The radio clicks off. Rain fills the silence again. The lieutenant hesitates, as if searching for the right final words. When he speaks, his tone is quieter. The war is nearly finished, he says. For you, it is already finished, already finished. The phrase echoes inside Carl's mind long after the Americans leave. Around him, prisoners lie back on their bunks, staring into darkness. Some pray softly, others weep without sound. Brandt speaks from the next bed. If Berlin falls, what are we then? Carl does not answer immediately. All his life, identity has been simple. German, soldier, obedience without question. The uniform decided everything, but the uniform is gone now, and Germany, the Germany he knew, may already be gone too. Hours pass. The rain stops. Moonlight slips through the windows, pale and uncertain. Carl rises quietly and walks to the barracks door. Outside, the camp sleeps beneath silver light. Barbed wire glows faintly. An American guard walks his slow patrol, humming something under his breath, soft, almost peaceful. Carl grips the wooden doorframe. For the first time since his capture, he allows himself to imagine the unthinkable. What if survival is not defeat? What if the war ending is not the worst outcome? The thought feels dangerous, disloyal, and yet relieving. Behind him, a voice breaks the silence. The older gray-haired sergeant, who cried over bread days earlier, is sitting upright on his bunk. It's over, the man says quietly. Even if the guns are still firing, it's over. No one argues. Because deep down, they all feel it, the slow, irreversible turning of history, not with explosions, but with absence. Fewer rumors of victory, more certainty of collapse. Carl steps outside into the cool night air. He looks up at the unfamiliar American sky, searching for something he cannot name. On the front, the future was measured in minutes of survival. Here, it stretches forward wide, uncertain, terrifying. Freedom once meant fighting. Now, freedom might mean something else entirely. And somewhere far across the ocean, in a bunker beneath a shattered city, a final decision is already forming, one that will soon reach even this quiet camp in North Carolina. When it does, the prisoners of Camp Butner will face a question more difficult than war itself. How do you return home when the home you fought for no longer exists? April 15, 1945. Midday. The sun cuts through the Carolina sky, sharp and blinding, bouncing off the wire fences surrounding Camp Butner. Inside, the prisoners line up for lunch, but the atmosphere is different now. There is no tension, only a quiet, almost stunned awareness that the war they had served faithfully for years is slipping through their fingers like sand. Feldwebel Karl Heinemann stands at the end of the line, tray in hand. He looks down at the meal before him, 2 thick slices of white bread, a generous portion of roasted beef, mashed potatoes, and a glass bottle of Coca-Cola sweating in the spring heat. The sight is absurdly beautiful. He takes a deep breath and opens the bottle, the hiss of carbonation sharp in the silent hall. As he sips, the sweetness floods his tongue, and something unexpected happens. A single tear slips down his cheek. He does not wipe it. He does not hide it. He has survived Stalingrad, the Ardennes, and the collapse of the Western Front, and yet here he is, weeping over something as simple as cold sugar water. Across the hall, Obergefreiter Lucas Brandt watches his own hand tremble as he tears into the bread. He thinks of the starvation he endured in Russia, the frozen nights when a single slice of hard bread was a miracle. And now, here, abundance stretches before him like a cruel joke. Do they know we can see them? Brandt whispers to no one in particular. Do they know how much this breaks us? A younger soldier beside him stifles a sob, hiding his face in the tray. Men murmur quietly, sharing the same disbelief, the same mixture of gratitude and guilt. Some stare at the ceiling, others at the floor, as if trying to understand how this could be real. Carl glances at the guards. They are chatting, relaxed, the way civilians might during a lunch break. There is no mockery, no hidden agenda, just life, a life so alien that it feels like a threat. It is in this hall, in the mundane act of being fed, that the prisoners begin to realize the truth of what they had been told about America, the starvation propaganda, the warnings of merciless cruelty, all lies. Carefully constructed lies meant to harden men for a losing war, and if the enemy is capable of such abundance, such humanity, then the war itself has been waged on lies. Carl leans back in his chair, letting the warmth of the hall seep into his bones. He thinks of his hometown of Cologne, streets emptied by bombing, mothers trading jewelry for turnips, children too thin to stand. He remembers the fear that had once defined him, fear of defeat, fear of starvation, fear of a world that seemed endless in its cruelty. Now the fear is replaced by something heavier, comprehension. The truth hits him like a hammer. This war was not only being lost in the field, it had been lost in the heart. And no amount of loyalty, courage, or propaganda could change it. The Coca-Cola slips from his fingers. He catches it just in time, almost laughing at himself. The sound echoes through the hall. The laughter is quiet, broken, but it spreads like wildfire. Soon, others chuckle, then laugh outright. A sergeant in the back wipes his eyes and shakes his head. No, he says softly. This can't be real, but it is. And in the quiet corners of that mess hall, the prisoners feel something they have not felt in years. Relief. Not victory, not joy, just relief. The kind that comes from knowing survival is possible, that the enemy is human, and that some things like bread and kindness cannot be destroyed even in war. And yet, beneath the relief, a question gnaws. If the world outside is crumbling, if the Reich they swore to defend is collapsing by the hour, then what is left for them to fight for? Carl finishes the last sip of his drink. The fizz tickles his throat. He looks around at the men, at their weary faces, at the slow dawning understanding in their eyes. Some weep, some laugh, some sit silently, too stunned to move. All feel the same thing, though none dare name it aloud. The war is not just ending, it has already ended for them, in the most profound way possible. And in that quiet, extraordinary moment, Carl understands something terrifying. The enemy's generosity has done what bullets never could. It has broken their certainty, the certainty that they were always right, the certainty that the Reich would endure, the certainty that loyalty alone could keep the world intact. And that realization, Carl knows, is harder to survive than any battlefield. Because once certainty is gone, everything else, fear, guilt, shame, memory rises to take its place. And Camp Butner, with its white bread and Coca-Cola, will haunt them forever. April 20th, 1945. Dawn breaks slowly over Camp Butner, a pale light spilling across the pine trees and gravel paths. The prisoners, once wary and tense, move with an unfamiliar ease. There is no urgency, no drills, no shouting, just life continuing at its own measured pace. Feldwebel Karl Heinemann steps outside for the first time in days, inhaling the crisp morning air. The camp stretches before him, orderly and strangely serene. He notices a small group of prisoners tending to the garden carrots, cabbages, and beans growing in neat rows behind a low fence. The men work with care, not as soldiers forced to labor, but as humans reacquainted with the idea of purpose beyond war. Karl walks past the volleyball nets where some of the younger soldiers are tossing a ball back and forth. He almost laughs at the absurdity, how quickly life finds a foothold even in captivity. And yet, beneath the surface, a tension remains. The letters from home have begun to arrive. Some bring news of death, some of survival. One young soldier reads aloud a telegram: Berlin under siege. The Reich crumbles, surrender inevitable. His voice trembles, but he keeps reading. Around him, the others listen in silence, absorbing the bitter confirmation of everything they had long suspected. Karl's thoughts drift to his own family. Cologne, reduced to rubble. Letters stopped coming months ago. He does not know if anyone he loved is alive, and yet, here he is alive, clothed, fed, free from immediate danger. The contrast between his current reality and the chaos he has left behind is almost unbearable. By midday, the prisoners gather for another meal. The long tables are filled with bread, meat, vegetables, and bottles of Coca-Cola. The soldiers move through the line mechanically at first, still unsure if this abundance is real. Then, almost simultaneously, a shift occurs. The trays are no longer objects of suspicion, they are lifelines. Plates fill, hands tremble less, faces soften. Karl sits next to Obergefreiter Brandt, who breaks the silence. "Do you understand?" Brandt asks quietly. This proves everything we were told was wrong." Karl nods slowly, swallowing a lump in his throat. "It's not just the food," he says. "It's the whole system. They could have destroyed us, humiliated us, starved us. And yet they chose not to." A wave of disbelief sweeps the table. The men exchange glances, realizing that the enemy they had been taught to hate is capable of mercy. That mercy, simple and ordinary, carries a weight heavier than any artillery shell. Karl sets down his fork and looks around. Every man here is grappling with the same revelation. The war has ended in more ways than one. Not with the roar of guns or the surrender of armies, but with something subtler: humanity. Later that afternoon, Karl finds himself near the fence, watching an American guard toss a ball toward a small dog that has wandered into the camp. The guard laughs, the dog leaps, and for a moment, the world outside the wire feels impossibly distant. Karl closes his eyes. He can almost hear the frozen streets of Stalingrad, the frozen mud of the Ardennes, the bombs over Cologne, and then he feels something he thought was buried forever: relief. Not triumph, not happiness, just relief. For the first time, he imagines a life beyond the wire. A life that does not depend on obedience, on uniform, on orders shouted over the roar of artillery. A life where bread is soft, meat is real, and a cold drink from a glass bottle can bring a man to tears, not from fear, but from the recognition of simple abundance. Yet the shadow of the Reich still lingers in their minds. Some prisoners speak in hushed tones about what they will find when they return home. Others remain silent, afraid of what memories may confront them. Karl does not speak. He walks slowly back toward the barracks, each step heavy with the knowledge that freedom, once claimed, is only the beginning of a different kind of struggle. That night, the prisoners sit outside, looking at the stars. The camp is quiet, the kind of quiet that humbles a man who has survived decades of war. Karl listens to the soft hum of the pine trees, the distant bark of dogs, and the occasional laugh of guards off duty. He realizes that life continues, indifferent to ideology, indifferent to the battles men have fought. And for the first time in years, he allows himself to hope, not for victory, not for revenge, not even for Germany, but for something smaller, something human, survival, peace, the simple dignity of being alive. Yet, as he stares at the stars, a thought creeps into his mind, unbidden and chilling. If the enemy could show such mercy in victory, then what does that say about the world he is about to re-enter? A world where his country lies in ruins, where his comrades may never see home again, and where truth once so carefully hidden by lies must now be faced head-on. Carl turns back to the barracks. The soft lights inside glow like candles against the dark. He takes a deep breath, knowing that tomorrow, the prisoners of Camp Butner will step beyond the wire and into a world that has already moved on without them. And nothing they thought they knew will ever be the same. April 25, 1945. Morning. The trucks are ready. Engines rumble softly against the gravel. Karl Heinemann climbs in, shoulder to shoulder with the others. The familiar canvas covers flap in the breeze, a faint echo of the ride that brought them here weeks ago, but this time, the ride is different. They are not prisoners anymore, not in the way they imagined. The uniforms they wear are the same, but something invisible has shifted. Each man carries the memory of white bread, of steaming meat, of chilled Coca-Cola sliding across the tongue like revelation. Karl stares out the slit in the canvas. Pines blur past. He remembers the towns burned by retreating German forces, the civilians scavenging rubble for food. And he wonders what will they find when they return. The train ride back to Europe is long, and silence dominates the cars. Some men sleep. Some stare out the windows, eyes vacant, searching for familiar landscapes that may no longer exist. And others like Karl sit quietly, turning memories over like stones in their hands. Each one weighed with guilt, disbelief, and the strange recognition that life can still be ordinary even after extraordinary violence. When they finally step off the train in France, the air is thick with spring and smoke. Fields stretch in mottled greens and browns, scarred by shell craters and burned villages. Karl breathes it in. It is home, sort of, but not the home he left. News has already traveled ahead. Villages whisper about surrender. Rumors about which cities still stand, which factories survive, which families remain. It is not a welcome, it is a reckoning. Karl walks through a street in ruins. The cafe he once visited as a young man is now a skeleton of brick and plaster. Windows shattered, doors splintered, the smell of ash hangs in the air. He reaches instinctively for the pocket where a letter from home should be. Nothing. Silence. Absence. Obergefreiter Brandt lingers nearby, gazing at the shell of a bakery. He shakes his head slowly. Even if we survived, he says softly, This isn't ours anymore. Karl wants to argue. He wants to cling to the past, but he cannot. The war they fought for, the cause they believed in, has crumbled. And the truth from Camp Butner, the truth about abundance, about mercy, about an enemy capable of humanity follows him like a shadow into the ruins. That evening, they gather around a small fire in a village square. Karl breaks out a loaf of bread gray and heavy, like the kind he once knew in Stalingrad. He bites into it, and the taste is bitterly familiar. It is survival, but it is not comfort, not like the bread in Camp Butner, not like the sweetness of the Coke that once made him cry in disbelief. He looks at his comrades, faces lined with exhaustion, grief, and an unspoken acknowledgement that the world has shifted under their feet. And yet, there is also a fragile spark hope, perhaps, or simply the stubbornness of life that refuses to be extinguished. Karl leans back and exhales. For years, he had measured life in orders, in victories, in defeat. Now he measures it in small truths, a warm meal, a moment of rest, the chance to see another sunrise. The camp in North Carolina had changed them in ways bullets could never. It had shown them that the enemy could be humane, that survival could be dignified, and that propaganda, no matter how convincing, was never the final word. And as he stares into the dying embers of the fire, Karl realizes something terrifying and liberating all at once. The war may be over, but the battle for memory, for identity, for understanding, has only just begun, because a soldier can survive armies. He can survive captivity. He can survive starvation. But surviving truth, especially the truth about what the enemy was capable of, demands a kind of courage that no training can prepare you for. Karl Heinemann, battle-hardened, weary, and deeply changed, takes a final bite of bread. It is heavy, dense, and real. It is nothing like the bread at Butner, and yet it tastes like life. He swallows, he stands, and he walks forward into a world that has already moved on, carrying with him the memory of white bread, Coca-Cola, and the strange mercy of a war that ended not with triumph, but with understanding.